Hello everyone, it's Tuesday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. Today, August 29th, marks International Day Against Nuclear Tests, aiming to raise awareness about the effects of nuclear weapons testing and make a nuclear weapons-free world. Ever since the U.S. conducted the first nuclear test explosion at Los Alamos, New Mexico, the atomic age began. A lot of efforts have been made to reduce nuclear danger, including coming up with treaties such as the NPT, New START Agreement, and CTBT. However, the world is still witnessing nuclear arsenals actually being upgraded rather than nuclear disarmament. Marking this very day, Within the Frame would like to talk about efforts that have been made up till now, the status quo, and the direction to go for a nuclear-safe future. And for this, we invite Elena Sokova, Executive Director at the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation. Welcome, Director Sokova.
Thank you for having me. Welcome to the viewers.
Thank you for being with us. And we also have Professor Kim Young-jun from the Korea National Defense University. Good to see you, Professor Kim.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Now, first question to our Director Sokova. So, ever since the Trinity test and the nuclear weapons were made, many international treaties to ban nuclear testing and reduce the nuclear danger have been made. What were they?
Well, it was very clear after the first use of nuclear weapons that it is a dangerous and inhumane weapon. And if you think about the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs, their yield was relatively low compared to the more modern weapons. However, it took so many years of testing, including an enormously powerful nuclear weapons, and also a Cuban Missile Crisis, before countries agreed to at least to prohibit testing, partial testing of nuclear weapons. In 1963, the treaty on the partial nuclear test ban was negotiated, and nuclear testing was prohibited in the atmosphere, in the outer space, and underwater. However, underground testing still remained. And in between 1945 and until 1996, when the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty was negotiated, more than 2,000 nuclear tests were performed. More precisely, 2,047. That is, if you count it, it's one nuclear test every 9 days. So only in 1996, countries were able to negotiate a comprehensive nuclear test ban treaty. And that prohibited nuclear testing in all, both the partial already tests prohibited the atmospheric, outer space, and underwater, and the comprehensive test ban treaty prohibited all nuclear testing. Obviously, nuclear testing have always been part and parcel of the non-proliferation regime. It's even in the preamble of the Non-Proliferation Treaty on Nuclear Weapons and many other resolutions and treaties.
Right, I see. So there has been many efforts made, but I'd like to specifically focus on the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, which was established in 1996, and of course the CTBTO, which was tasked with building the verification regime of the CTBT, was established as well. Now, Professor Kim, could you give us more details about this treaty?
Yes, CTBT is the multilateral treaty to ban all nuclear explosion tests for military or peaceful purpose, as Director Sokova explained. It was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly, signed in 1996, and about 178 states ratified. but 8 countries signed but not ratified, including China, North Korea, and the U.S. CTBTO is to conduct CTBT, an international organization for verification when there is a nuclear test. CTBTO has an international monitoring system we call IMO, and communication infrastructure and international data center, and conduct on-site inspection as well. So IMS include 179 seismic monitoring station and 11 hydroacoustic station and the 60 infrasound station, as well as the 80 radio nuclide station and 16 radio nuclear laboratory as well.
Right, I see. Now, Director Sokova, as our Professor Kim already mentioned, the U.S. and China are the countries that have signed the treaty but have yet to ratify it. And thus, many experts say that this treaty is in operation but not in force. Even with such cases, what progress could we say that CTBT has accomplished so far, and what significance does signing and ratifying such a treaty have?
Right, as was already mentioned, that there are still 8 countries without their full signature and ratification of the treaty. The treaty cannot enter into force. There is a specific provision in the treaty called Annex 2 countries. Until all of them join the treaty formally, then the treaty continues to be not in force. Having said that, the fact that 186 countries have already signed the treaty and 176 ratified it, one of the strongest part of the treaty and the regime it established is that it's established a norm against nuclear testing. As to a certain degree, it's a taboo on nuclear testing. When we speak about nuclear taboo, mostly people think about the use of nuclear weapons. But the CTBT also established a norm against nuclear testing. And the longer the treaty, the norm is not violated, the stronger the norm becomes. The only country that actually tested since 2000 is North Korea. And it is an outlier in this respect. For any other country, if it wants to resume testing, the political costs would be enormous of doing that. So fortunately for other countries, the moratoria or self-imposed moratoria still works. The significance of non-nuclear testing also helps to strengthen overall nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament regime and efforts. The absence of nuclear testing prevents countries from developing new warheads that where scientists would be probably uncomfortable with using non-tested designs of nuclear warheads. So to a certain degree, the treaty, even though it's not enforced, still prevents horizontal and vertical proliferation of nuclear weapons.
Right, I see. So this treaty is significant in that it established norm against nuclear testing. But Professor Kim, there still have been 12 tests since 1996, and I'd like to ask you the more details of these tests.
Yes, unfortunately, there has been some tests, after CTBT signed in 1996. Scholar experts call this group as a second nuclear age. The first nuclear age is conducted by the US, Russia, China, UK, and France. So these countries, India, conducted a test in 1998, and Pakistan also conducted a test in 1998. And then the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, so-called North Korea, conducted nuclear tests, as we already know, 2006, 2009, 2013, 16, and finally 17. So different countries have a different reason and motivation to conduct this kind of test. And North Korea nuclear test is the latest one, and international problem now and causing instability worldwide. The United Nations did a sanction, but North Korea never stopped the nuclear test. And scholar experts that very concerned about this one. And this is we call the second nuclear age now.
Right, I see. We are going to talk about those countries later on, but before that, Director Sokova, I'd like to focus on North Korea. So North Korea is the only country that has conducted a nuclear test since 2000, and there's still a high possibility that Pyongyang will go ahead with the seventh one. Under what conditions or timing do you believe North Korea would go through with it?
Well, there are probably two types of issues that we're looking at. One is the technical side of conducting nuclear tests. If North Korea believes that or it develops new types of warheads, it may think that it needs to test. Because testing is the verification of the workability of a nuclear warhead. In principle, it conducted 6 tests, and the last test, as far as I understand, we think that it was a weapon that used both HEU and plutonium in it. Having said that, if it does feel that it needs to test to improve its nuclear warheads and arsenal, it is possible that it will resume nuclear testing. The other side of the issue is political, where a country could decide that it wants to conduct a nuclear test by sending a signal to either the US or other countries that it is prepared to sort of up the ante of the threats or raise the escalation. From what I see, I'm not a kind of satellite imagery analyst myself, but I rely quite a lot on the work of other organizations that use satellite imagery analysis to assess the preparedness and activities around the North Korea's nuclear testing site. And so far, their assessment is that there have been some activities, but they're lower level activities that do not point out to a preparation for a nuclear test. So with some of these uncertainties, at least we could probably detect preparations if a nuclear test, if North Korea decides that it needs to test nuclear weapons.
Right. So though we'd have to wait and see, North Korea could feel the need to go ahead with the seventh test for either a technical reason or a political reason behind. Now, Professor Kim, staying on North Korea front, when visiting South Korea, the CTBTO chief advised North Korea that it should take a small step in committing to not proceeding with the seventh nuclear test in order to build some bridges of trust and confidence with other countries. How do you see this view?
Yeah, CTBTO is an international organization for banning nuclear tests and its verification regime. So CTBTO is always advised diverse negotiation tool and confidence building measure. Confidence building measure is a key element of CTBT. So that's why CTBT or chief always advise on that. Every time CTBTO ship visit South Korea, I always arrange some meeting at the National Assembly with him. And diverse measure, we had a discussion on that and conducted for confidence building, just like the Republic of Korea now is want to have an audacious initiative with North Korea, open for any negotiation tool with North Korea without any precondition, and the U.S. government as well. So this kind of a confidence building measure is the right way for having denuclearization of North Korea in banning another 7 nuclear tests. And confidence building measure maybe could include the hotline or early sharing information or arms control and negotiation process. So all of the confidence building measure as always the CTBTO ship advice, and this is a right direction.
Right, I see. Now, let's turn our focus on China, Director Sokova. So China is also one of those countries increasing its nuclear weapons stockpile. And some say Beijing has no other choice but to do that to increase its nuclear warheads. Is this really so?
Well, if you look at the arsenals of the major nuclear powers, the United States and the Russian Federation still possess a much larger arsenals. And between the two of them, they account for 85% of the global nuclear weapons arsenal. China, in this respect, has a much lower arsenal of nuclear warheads. For example, the United States and Russia each have over 5,000 nuclear warheads. Estimates of China's arsenal put it at around a little bit above 400 warheads. However, there are also estimates by the US Pentagon that China by 2030 may increase its arsenal to more than 1,000 nuclear warheads. So we do see a pretty rapid growth of the arsenal in China. The United States tried to engage China in arms control, but it looks like China feels that its nuclear arsenal is really incomparable with those of the United States and Russia. Well, with Russia, it's a different story, relationship, but it is difficult to predict exactly how the buildup will grow and how fast and what are the specific numbers, because China is also one of the countries that is extremely intransparent in terms of its nuclear arsenals and number of warheads and missiles. We know from the US and Russia, because they had bilateral treaties, arms control treaties, where they reported the number of the warheads. So with China, we do see the growth of nuclear arsenals and lack of transparency at top of it. But if a country feels that it needs to build up a nuclear arsenal before it can sit down and negotiate, unfortunately, without any legal instruments or agreements, it's very difficult to prevent it.
Right, I see. Well, Director Sokova, one more question. The war in Ukraine is also intensifying fear of nuclear war more than ever before, and some say that NATO's weapon support for Ukraine might increase Russia's nuclear threat. Do you agree with this?
I would agree with one thing, that the threat and risks of use of nuclear weapons certainly went dramatically up since the start of the war and Russian aggression in Ukraine, particularly because of some of the threats that were made and continue to be made by Russia. However, it is also demonstrated that there are limitations on what nuclear weapons and nuclear deterrence could do. If we look at the history of the supply of different types of weapons to Ukraine, at the beginning of the war, there were concerns even about supplying some of the HIMARS and other weapons. Now we see the supply of much more advanced weapons, including F-16 airplanes. So it does demonstrate that on one hand, deterrence works, and NATO and the US avoided to get into a direct kinetic impact with Russia. But on the other hand, it also demonstrated the limits of nuclear deterrence. And as the red lines, or perceived red lines, keep moving, and then more weaponry, more advanced weaponry is provided to Ukraine, I think that we are seeing even more the limitations of deterrence. And at this point, even though the risk is still high, but I think the risk of escalation to nuclear level is really starting to be part of the picture when hopefully we won't come to it, have a situation where the Russian Federation and NATO troops or countries are engaged directly.
I see your point. Now, we are running out of time, but I'd like to ask our Professor Kim this question. The increase in the number of nuclear warheads is, of course, an issue that needs to be dealt with, but experts point out that the modernization of nuclear-related technology is a much bigger issue. Do you agree with this? And to make the world safe from nuclear threats, what should be first done?
Yeah, nuclear modernization is the main concern of the international community. Nuclear weapon states, just like China, is a problem, and also as well as the emerging nuclear state that we call nuclear armed state, including India, Pakistan, and North Korea, as a main problem of this one. Now it's North Korea focus on the tactical nuclear weapons and miniaturization of their nuclear warhead with the short and middle range missiles. So this causes international concern and regional instability for another nuclear war. So international community try to minimize the nuclear warhead at the same time, no first nuclear use doctrine, and fundamentally in the end, no nuclear zone like the regional nuclear free zone and TPNW. So this is an international community effort, and then South Korea and other international community try to ban another 7 nuclear weapon tests.
Right, I see. Hope we could go toward the nuclear safe world marking this day. I'd like to ask many more questions, but unfortunately this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Director Sokova and Professor Kim, for your time and your insights. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.